evening, everyone. Sorry about a little bit of the late start, but we are here and we are excited to be with you for day 14th of the ASF Virtualpalooza. You are once again in for a treat tonight. We have two amazing and wonderful individuals who are going to be here to share their journey and their words of wisdom for our community. For those of you that this might be your first time with us tonight, welcome to the ASF Virtualpalooza. We're excited and we're so glad that you took the time to be with us tonight. And as a thank you, you will be receiving an awesome ASF Virtualpalooza t-shirt in the mail in the next couple weeks. Also have to tell you, you've got to sign up for that virtual walk. It's coming up soon. We're going to have so much fun together on September 5th, and we have an awesome virtual app that you're going to be able to do to walk and unlock some awesome milestones, do some raffles, great gifts. It's going to be a great time, so make sure you sign up. So none of you came to hear me tonight, so we're going to go ahead and jump right in because we have a lot to get to with our first speaker of tonight. And if you haven't got a chance to hear from her, you are very lucky. She spoke at our 2019 family conference, and she has been part of this Angelman community for so long. And I'm going to let her share her story with you. And I'm going to invite my dear friend, Pat Hornbecker, onto the phone now. Welcome, Pat.
Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. And being a longtime Angelman participant means I'm just old. And it also means that my son is 40 years old. I have 4 children. Joseph is the oldest of my 4, and he is my Angelman kid who is now an adult. This first screen shows you what we're talking about today. We're talking about a journey to adulthood. I know there's been a presenter that did the IEP world of school and negotiating all of that. Well, there is another world that we all have to negotiate after school. And I wish I had had this information by the time my son was getting out of school. So we have created this over the years just because this is what people need to know before you get out of school. Anyway, it is starting. The Journey to Adulthood has my email on it, and there is a bit.ly link on the lower left side of this screen, which will give you the link to this presentation, so you don't have to frantically be trying to take notes all the time. Okay, let's go to our next screen. So this is the design of what I thought was Joseph's life as we were getting out of the school system. We were in transition from 18 to 22, and Joseph's in the center with his angel wings. And just as for sense of humor, my daughter tattooed the Angelman syndrome angel on her ankle at about the same time as he was exiting stage right to move into his own apartment. And that is my daughter, Sarah, who's a special ed teacher. She's also the one that helped make these slides. So thanks, Sarah, and her 2 sisters also. So we've got a whole crew that have been supporting Joseph all of these years. So let's start with box number 1. Let's go to that screen and we'll just start walking our way through each one of them. San Francisco Unified School District is where we started. In that 18 to 22 years, we were really starting to plan to figure out what's going to happen when we get out of school. Where is he going to live? What's he going to do? Jobs, no jobs. And it was going to be complicated. We knew that. And I didn't know much about the adult world at all. I had affiliated myself with the ARC of California, the ARC of San Francisco, and the ARC of the United States. And they did help educate me about what was going on and what was available. Putting it all together was a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. Joseph had been in school with a one-to-one paraprofessional since 5th grade, and he was fully included in all of middle school and high school. So we were ready to move on. Joseph actually moved into his own apartment at age 21 as he was leaving the school system. It was amazing and crazy at the same time. What it meant was that he went to school in the morning, like for his transition program, as he usually did, leaving my house And then he went to his own apartment in the evening. And it was crazy for us to try and figure out how we were going to support him in that house. One of the first things we did was start looking at IHSS in-home support services for all the personal services, feeding, bathing, food prep, dressing. Those were the things we knew we needed to have ready and surrounding his day, getting him off to school. So in applying for IHSS, we realized that we also needed Social Security, which we had been denied before age 18. They said, no, you make too much money and he's not disabled enough. Well, I can hear all of the parents in the audience laughing at that one, because that's crazy. And I was not able to get any Social Security for him until he turned 18. At that point, he did qualify for SSI, and then SSI has to be the referral for the in-home support services. So once they did that, they sent us an assessment, and we had a guy come over to my house and do an assessment of Joseph. And they were saying, well, what would happen if you left the house and left him here alone? Well, I told them the story that all of us probably know, that the house would probably burn down. He would turn on all the bathtubs and the sinks, play in the bubble, maybe turn on the gas in the stove, and we would probably lose the house. In so doing, he qualified for the maximum amount of hours for IHSS. So it's the 283 hours of protective supervision. Next slide, please. So in getting the SSI, that's $4,600 a month of support for Joseph. We could hire the staff. Joseph is the employer of those staff, and Joseph and I hire them together. It's an interesting dance that we do, trying to hire the people, but when people click and when they don't click. And Kathy's going to give you lots of information about hiring staff in the next segment. In looking at supported employment, we missed it. Oh, I see. I reordered these and now they're back the other way. The supported employment was something I was concerned about Joseph having a job. I said, well, maybe he'll be able to work in supported employment because it's a one-to-one kind of thing out in and at law firms, at grocery stores, and things like that. The problem is it's funded through the Department of Rehab, which is state, and the Home and Community-Based Service Waiver, which is federal, which is great, except for the fact they have very time-limited coaching. They only give you a coach for 18 months, expecting you then to be independent. Well, that wasn't going to work, so we didn't do that. I said, let's see if we can find another employment opportunity, and we kept looking. Next slide. Independent living services was what we added to his apartment. Living in his apartment, independent living services, they said, well, we'll send somebody over once a week, make sure he does his shopping and his house is clean and the food is getting cooked. And I went, whoa, 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 whoa. That's not going to work. That is also for someone much more independent than Joseph, but because he definitely needed 24/7 support. So we did not do that. But these ILS services are also a state and federal matched program. It's important to understand the funding, if only to be able to use it as leverage to get these programs into your individual program. In California, we have an entitlement law called Lanterman Act. And so we have a world of IPPs. It's not IEP, but it's a similar program in that we are writing an individual program plan for Joseph about his entire life, from work and play and community integration and where he's going to live and how he's going to live and how much support he needs for his life. Well, we had by this time discovered he obviously knew he needed 24/7 support. Next slide. So going back to SSI, because these are not in the same order. If you have applied for Social Security before age 18 and been denied, because I think they automatically have to deny you just at least once. It's like insurance. They will, you come back after 18, apply again, and as long as you are a person with disabilities who earn little or no money and have no assets over $2,000, you will most likely get the SSI. SSI comes from tax revenue, not from the Social Security Trust Fund. So it is a different funding stream. These are just points that have long time needed to be in my brain, so I've written them down. Joseph receives $943.72 from SSI for his SSI monthly. 160 bucks of it is from the state, and that is an optional addition or inclusion in that amount of money. Each state can add more or less, and sometimes we've had different governors and they don't contribute anything other than the federal amount, which takes 160 bucks out of Joseph's pocket every month. Being eligible for SSI meant we were now eligible for Medi-Cal, which is the Medicare name for Medicare in California. That was important for any medical support that he needed, medications, doctors, including dental, and it made a difference on how we were going to make decisions about his private insurance that he had had up until 18. Next slide. 6. There we go. Housing. So how did he have a house? Well, during the years he was in school, especially those transition years, I was part of a capital campaign with the Arc of San Francisco, working with the city of San Francisco's consolidation plan. Every city has to have a housing consolidation plan that stipulates that a percentage of housing must go to people with disabilities and the elderly. And we found that in San Francisco at that time, they didn't even have one. They didn't have anything for the elderly, and they had nothing for the disabled. And so we had them do that. They helped us. They bought a building. They gave it to the Arc San Francisco. We raised the money to finish building it because we had to raise the building that was there. And it is where Joseph lives, in an apartment building, Fisherman's Wharf, San Francisco. It has now been deemed by the Housing and Urban Development Department as a Section 811 building. And Section 811 buildings are not really around anymore. They aren't doing them anymore, but there are Section 8 vouchers you can use for housing. And there are other ways of funding these housing. But we built it through the Arc of San Francisco, and they gave us the land for $1, and then they built it with a lease and yada yada. But going to your local public housing authority is where you would end up looking for housing options for low-income people, for the elderly, and talk to your mayor's office on disabilities, which many of them do have. So his HUD building determines what the fair market rate rent is for him. In his 2-bedroom apartment, they said it's $600. Well, trust me, in San Francisco, you can't get an outhouse for $600, but that's what they say. And he cannot be made to pay more than 30% of his income, which is his SSI, to fund that as rent. Therefore, his rent monthly is $232 a month. He also, because of his level of disability, HUD did an assessment and said that he needed to have a live-in companion to live with him free of rent. So Joseph lives in 1 bedroom and his live-in attendant lives in the other bedroom without paying any rent. I've been able, over the 20 years Joseph has lived in this apartment, been able to have a number of staff who have stayed with us very long periods of time. I think Jordan, who is his current live-in attendant, has only been there, is only like the 4th person I've had in 20 years. So people are staying 5, 7 years all the time because these are students. They're people, artists, musicians, people that don't, that need a little bit of space and have no rent to pay. So this has worked out great. They are often very creative people, and they have been the best live-in attendants I've been able to hire for Joseph. 7. Next slide. Supported living services. This is the wraparound services that we ended up creating for Joseph. The supported living services are for people with more severe disabilities that ILS is just not going to work for them. They need somebody there supervising them at all times. Again, this is also a federal and state match. Our regional centers are the state agency that funds the ARC of San Francisco to supply the services for Joseph in his apartment. I have taken the IHSS staff and the supported living staff. We have cross-trained them. We have made sure that they are all bonded by the ARC of San Francisco. They have the CPR training, the fingerprinting, and all of the clearances one needs so that they can also support each other. Because most of the IHSS hours are done perhaps when Joseph's not there, like the shopping and the cleaning of the apartment and those kinds of things. But the supported living services are often the people that are taking him out into the community. He's walking out to Pier 39, or they're hanging around. They're doing a lot of other things. So these hours were determined again by the IPP. And when we work with our state agency, we factor in the IHSS hours, we factor in the supported living hours, and to make it a whole, and that everybody can work together, which obviously means we end up building a team of probably about 7 people that are working for Joseph at any time, although there's usually only one person with him at a time. Next slide. Integrated work program. After we had looked at the supported employment program and found that the one-to-one, even though that sounded great, wasn't going to work because he had to eventually be independent, and I knew he never would, we decided to go with the integrated work program. It's a completely individualized program combining paid work and community volunteer activities. This program is usually 1 to 3 at the ARC San Francisco, but it was 1-to-1 with Joseph, and he was the beginning of their 1-to-1 program as a whole, working with the ARC of San Francisco. That just, there was no way 1 to 3 worked. I think he had a 1 to 3 ratio when he did he had a job as a graffiti remover, and that was kind of fun. He loved the uniform and the bright lime colored vest he had to wear walking around the street, and he painted the graffiti off of buildings. Thank God he wasn't having to paint within the lines. It was just the opposite. He did have a job through this program working for Nordstrom's. He was cleaning coffee break rooms, cleaning the tables and straightening the chairs. He had a job coach with him 24/7. So there was somebody there with him doing the work alongside or shadowing him. The more he started doing this work, the more you could pull back on the supervision of the coach, which was really kind of cool. Another place he worked was in St. Vincent de Paul, the clothing closet. He was unhanging clothes, which is a skill, quite a skill. I never could teach him to put the clothes on the hanger, but I think that would be true of most boys, period. But on the other hand, I was able to teach him to find the hangers in all of the clothes. And I wasn't actually doing it, the job coach did. And he did that for a while. Some of the volunteer activities he did was working at the food bank, passing out food, the cans of food and putting them in the baskets. I know he felt that he was part of a community, part of the world, and that everyone appreciated the jobs he was doing. I do have to say that even though this was this work environment was great for him, we do probably do much more of the volunteer work. The meaningful volunteerism is much easier for me to manage budget-wise, so that the money he earns doesn't end up coming out of his pocket 6 months later, because he can only have a certain amount of money at a time. And so we ended up sticking with meaningful volunteerism. It was a team decision for all of us, but I think it's worked out better for all of us, and especially for Joseph. He likes it better. Next slide. So I'm summarizing some of the big changes that go on in your life as you try to make these decisions as you go to adulthood. The first one is the role you play in your son or daughter's life. The paradigm shift changes at 18, and you probably get that a little bit while you're still in the school system, where they say you can't sign the IEP. They don't invite you to the IEP. They say he's an adult now and he's in charge. Now you can get around that very easily without a lawyer or anything, because if they're going to accept Joseph's signature on his IEP, you very simply write a letter to whom it may concern, if it's a school district or an adult service provider, to whom it may concern. I am requesting that my mother be the person in charge of all of my advocacy, educational, physical, mental, medical, health, whatever decisions, and that she will be included in all meetings relevant to that. So that's how I got around it. But the reality is, once you move from the school arena to the adult world, you are going to have to prove that over and over and over again. And so it will bring up other issues. The medical provider, Joseph, moved from pediatrics to adult medicine, getting his Medi-Cal, Medicare in the rest of the states. And we also dropped his private insurance by about 18, 19. I guess when he moved out of his my house to his apartment, we got rid of the private insurance for the reason that we felt we were going to be able to access more services with him being on Medi-Cal. And also, they won't pay for certain things if you have medical insurance. They'll go through them first, which ends up costing you a lot of money also. Next slide. So the decisions we had to look at was conservatorship and guardianship. That was probably primary in my mind as he moved out of the my house to his own apartment. I needed to maintain some level of control over what was going on, including the staffing, the qualifying of the staffing, the hiring of the staffing, access to the services. If I trusted all of the bureaucracies around Joseph, from HUD to Social Security to schools to the ARC San Francisco to anybody else, if I trusted all of those agencies to do everything automatically the way they're supposed to, then I probably would not have done, tried to conserve Joseph. But I don't trust them. And I don't know what will change in the future. So I am hoping that my decision to do this is going to be responsible for the rest of his life. And they often say that they, meaning some of the advocates against guardianship, say that I am stripping away his rights or the rights of anybody who is disabled by usurping this right. Now, I don't make all these decisions without Joseph. Anything that's going on, I do. I keep him involved. And we do this as a team, as a family. And there may be others who don't do that, but that's not the way. Everything is supposed to be centered on Joseph, his needs, his desires, his wants. And so I do, which is why, including in all of the plans we've had, are plans about his friends, to keep them involved in his life, making sure he has friends. It's one thing that we often complain about as parents is, where do I find people that are not just paid staff to be around my kid? The activities that he participates, being able to go on vacations. For years, he always went on family vacations to Lake Tahoe. We took him to Disneyland. There are lots of places you want to do. You want to keep those activities in his life. How does he celebrate birthdays? What holidays do you celebrate, and how and with whom? Those are important things to keep in my son's life. Supported decision making is a kind of a halfway point, and that is newer, and people are using that instead of conservatorship and guardianship, but it is less restrictive, which is good in some ways, but I have a lot less control. So I've chosen to do this, and we'll stick with that for now. That's a whole nother session by itself. The next slide, please. So again, we talked about SSDI being denied before 18, come back at it, and you should be able to get the SSI after 18. And remember that you won't get IHSS unless you're referred from the Social Security office. Joseph just got the opportunity to get food stamps, which just happened last year. Up until then, even though he's considered indigent by the amount of money he makes through SSI, they would not allow him to get food stamps. And now last year they passed the law that you can get food stamps, which has made a big difference on his budget on a monthly level. And when you are looking for IHSS hours, you need to make sure the title, what you are looking for in order to get those max hours of 283, rather than just telling the anecdotal story. The title of his label is protective supervision. They deemed him to need protective supervision 100% of the time. That's why HUD gave him a live-in attendant. That's why he gets the max hours at 283. And they reevaluate it every year, but at 283, they have never changed it, because Joseph is Joseph, and he's not going to change as he gets older. So that's a very big term to remember and moving forward. The next slide, please. Housing options and the support services that go with them. We talked about ILS and SLS in the support services, but if you're not living outside of a parent's home and you're living at home, you can look at getting personal attendants to come into the home. And they won't necessarily be IHSS. That's a different service. But a personal attendant and a community integration training. This is where people will come in and take your son or daughter out into the community for fun, or for travel training, or for classes, or for a number of other activities that will be through a state agency that you are working with. I work with the ARC, and there's ARCs across the country. Your state council is probably where you would start looking for any and all of that. But this is definitely an option if you're still living in your family home. We talked about HUD, the 811 building, and the Section 8 vouchers. Section 8 vouchers are through your public housing authority, but they are rare. San Francisco hasn't had released any Section 8 vouchers in 15 years. Some do it all the time. That voucher will allow you to take it to an apartment and get a discount on the rent, so that you're not paying the scaled rent for the fair market. Supported living services we talked about, and supported living is living somewhere with someone there. Group homes are groups from 4 to 6 usually. Some of them can be much larger, although now the home and community-based waiver service rules are changing and not going to be allowing the larger group homes to exist. The home housing rule for home HCBS is to have your own key, your own room, and choose your own roommates, and have your own schedule in the house. If you live in a group home, you get up at the same time at 7, you eat breakfast with all of the residents, you go to the day program together, you come back, you have dinner together, and you go to bed at the same time. No pets, no fish, no whatever. Those are the rules that HCBS is trying to eliminate. And then finally, institutions, of course, which more and more are going away. We've closed our last institution in California, will close next year. Next slide. So work options that we have. We've talked about the integrated work that Joseph does, which is volunteer and work. And we talked about supported employment. There are sheltered workshops and work activity centers, which are different and paid through the state, a state and federal match that are much, they're different. The sheltered workshop is usually a job in a sheltered, as it implies, center where you are making goodie bags for a conference. You are putting together widgets for something else in a bigger world. And they are often not paid at, well, they're not paid at minimum wage. That requires a 14C certificate, and there's a lot of debate as to whether or not they will continue to exist. So as a result, a lot of sheltered workshops have been transitioning to the work activity centers. A work activity center is a congregate setting, just like the sheltered workshop, where people with disabilities are together, but you're not necessarily doing work, and you're not receiving a paycheck. You are there possibly taking classes, doing art, music, but you are in a congregate setting and you are not integrated into the community. Some of the things that Joseph has been able to do moving out of my house is he attended community college classes. He was going to, he took gospel choir classes. I always love that, especially for a kid with Angelman syndrome. He took a gospel choir class for 3 years, and that professor still remembers him. And honest to God, he could make a joyful noise, as they all sang. The vocational ed we didn't utilize as much, but that was also available at our community college. He's taken music classes, drum classes, art classes. He enjoys that. And there are some internships he has not availed himself yet of, that are in San Francisco. We have museums and libraries that have internships right there. And he could be doing that as well. So those are opportunities for the future, just to fill everybody's day, because we're not talking 40-hour weeks for people who are, people like Joseph who are going to work. His jobs are going to be 2 hours here and 3 hours there. And so it gets to be very creative to fill the puzzle in to fill his day and make him happy about it. Next slide. So then money, how do we pay for any and all of this, from the vacations to the holidays, birthdays? As you see, I'm also planning for when I'm gone. All right, this is a reality. I'm probably a lot closer to it than anyone in the audience, but I have always told Joseph's staff that whatever rules I lay out there for this, that, and the other thing, it's because I'm going to be dead someday. And when I'm dead, I need you guys to be able to act fine. I need to be the backup plan. I can't be your plan A or your plan B. So I'm trying to move back. In so doing, we set up a special needs trust for Joseph, which at this point is totally unfunded, but will be when I die. But it's built, you can build an estate for a person with disabilities without losing their public benefits. That is very important. Joseph cannot have access to these funds, so that's why it's a special needs trust. It's not just a living trust or a regular trust. It is a trust that he has no access to, and those trusts will must be managed by a trustee. So for now, it's me, and as I start to fund it, because I am getting older, I am the current trustee. But when I die, Joseph's sister will be the trustee to manage it. And he will still not have access to it, but he can go on his vacations and he can go buy what he wants to buy for his apartment or whatever. That will be things that would be above and beyond public benefits, and there will be no penalty. The ABLE accounts are something that just started about a year or two ago. They are called Achieving a Better Life Experience Act. it took a long time to get this through. I think they were advocating this for years. It's a savings and investment plan for people with disabilities that offers them the opportunity to save up to $100,000. Family, friends, employers could contribute $15,000 a year to this ABLE account, and it won't affect the public benefits that he or she has. You do have, the person with disabilities does have access to this money, and there are rules on how they can withdraw the money and what they can use it for. But if you withdraw it and take out $1,000 for a cruise or something, you can do that, and it's not it is tax-free. It is modeled on the current Section 529 savings accounts that a lot of parents are using for college for their kids without disabilities. So that was one of the ways we were able to make this work. Next slide. So the long and the short of it is that we are dealing with our own mortality as you enter this adult world. We have to start planning for when we're not here, and when the house you're living in is not going to be yours. The apartment you're living in is not going to be yours. We all as parents have had to try to plan for the future. But I have to tell you, I've run into so many families that when the parents die, we are dealing with what to do with this person with disabilities who is in our community and they have no plan. So planning for our lives after our death and planning for, our sons' lives and daughters after our death is essential at this point in time. And managing any inheritance you might receive or would go to your children is important. My father's 91 years old, and at some point in time when he is gone, I will be probably, that's how I'll fund Joseph's special needs trust. And then he'll be able to do the things he wants to do until I die or after I die. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And I'm sorry I wasn't controlling that, but I'm going to pass this on to Kathy Johnson, who has a lot to tell you about self-determination.
Actually, before Kathy goes, I just want to thank you, Pat, for your perspective. I think it's the one thing I've learned about the Angelman syndrome community and the Angelman syndrome world is everyone has such a vastly different experience with the different situations they're working on with their individuals. So it's really important for us to have these unique perspectives and to have everyone's perspective as families are moving into this space. So we really appreciate, and also I think it's important for people to understand that what you've set up for Joseph didn't happen overnight, right? It takes a lot of work to get where the situation that you're at. And I know, like, from, my child's only 5, but when I think about all the things that you have done to get Joseph in the situation he is now, in my mind, I'm like, where do you even start, right? Like, what's the first step when we're thinking about this stuff? So I just, we have a few questions, but we're going to let Kathy talk because I think it's important to share her perspective in her situation as well. So Pat and I will turn off our cameras. And then, Kathy, I'm going to pull your slides up. But as I'm doing that, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we can get started.
Okay, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Oh, good. Okay. Hello, my name is Kathy Johnson, and I am here to talk to you about self-determination. Sorry, new to the webinar.
Slides are up. Yep, your slides are up. You're good to go.
All right, I am here to talk to you about self-determination and how to implement a successful self-determination arrangement. I'm going to cover different things than Pat covered. She is an expert in everything she presented, and I kind of give you a different perspective. I'm going to go over what self-determination is, run self-determination arrangements. First of all, what is self-determination? It's a philosophy. It is a funding stream for people with disabilities to guide their own services. So self-determination is based on a set of principles based on what the person who receives services wants and needs. It's basically an agency developed for one person. So Amanda has her own agency, Angela has her own, and Rocky has his own. And they all of them have their separate budgets. So how do you start a self-determination arrangement? You know, kind of keep in mind, we started this when Amanda was 10 years old, and she is now 26. So I am trying to share with you the things that we've learned to kind of help you not have this as a 16-year road that you have to travel, because we had to, like Pat, figure out so much on our own. So when you first think of a self-determination arrangement, you need to think of what kinds of activities that person enjoys. You can flip the slide. Go to the next slide. Yep, there you go. Thank you. You make a list of activities that the person who is going to receive the self-determination funds, make a list of things that they enjoy. From that list, you're going to develop a person-centered plan, which is abbreviated a PCP. So for example, Amanda's current person-centered.
Uh-oh. I hope I didn't run out like that.
Kathy, are you still there?
To go shopping, and she does all of this apart from me. Pardon me? She does
Sorry,
all of this.
Sorry, Kathy, we lost you for 1 minute. So sorry about that. Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Sure can.
Hello? Okay, good. So you put all of your child's likes and activities and things that they enjoy doing into the PCP. From the PCP, you develop the budget that is going to fund community activities and support staff to ensure that your child can enjoy those community activities. And then you are going to, after your budget is done, you are going to implement a self-determination program. And how do you start doing that? Usually when you have a loved one with Angelman syndrome, the first thing you do is you find support staff. This has been a real learning experience for my family and I about how to find support staff and especially how to train them, because as parents, we do what we do every single day and we don't think much about it. We know it's hard work and we know sometimes it's not the easiest job, but we're very used to just getting in there and doing what needs to be done. And sometimes it's a little hard to tell somebody how to do what you do. And quite honestly, half the time, you're not going to think of a lot of the things that you do because you just go on automatic pilot and you do them. So in a self-determination arrangement, one of the first things you want to do is you want to start looking for support staff. In the last few years, local community Facebook pages have been a really good resource for support staff. We used to use Craigslist a lot, and that's still an option, but social media has exploded since I started doing the self-determination with my kids. So Facebook pages, great place to find support staff. Unemployment agency. You can sign up with your local unemployment agency in Michigan. It's called Michigan Works. And you can look through resumes, and if you find one that you like, you can give them a call. Word of mouth has worked excellent for us. I hired a girl off of a Facebook page, and she had worked for Amanda for about 6 months. And her husband came to get her one day, and they were both like in their mid-20s, and he came in, and, you know, my son Rocky really kind of wouldn't stop staring at him and really gravitated to him. So her boyfriend sat down on the floor and interacted with Rocky. He just knew what Rocky wanted. So the next day when he came to drop his girlfriend off at work, I said, "Are you by chance looking for a job?" And he said, "Yeah, I am." I ended up hiring him. That was 3 years ago, and he is still with us. So a lot of times you just look at your circle of people that you know, not even necessarily your friends, but people that enjoy interacting with your kids. And it never hurts to say, hey, do you want a job? Student services or bulletin boards through local colleges. College kids work out really well for my kids because I can work around somebody's college schedule. If they can only work 4 days a week, then I only schedule them 4 days a week because I have other providers that can take other days. Currently, right now, we have 7 providers working for the kids, and that gives them support staff 24 hours a day. Since my kids are all adults now, they have overnight care, which means, like Pat was talking about, we have worked for years to build up these supports and get the right people in place. So when I'm no longer here, and I know that's a depressing thought to all of us, but it's a reality, unfortunately, we all face. We've worked years to get to this point to where I don't have to be in my child's home. I am free to go on a vacation if I want. I am free to not come home for a night if I don't want to. And I know that my kids are well taken care of. And that's the most important thing to all of us. So in self-determination, I want to make a distinction here that was brought up to me last year. Self-determination is more like a philosophy for life and a funding, an avenue for funding. Just because somebody doesn't do self-determination does not mean that they should not be living a self-determined life. You can get support through an agency model, and there's nothing wrong with that. But your child or your loved one should still be leading a self-determined life. They are two different things. So on kind of on that vein, a staffing agency. A lot of people don't realize that if you do self-determination, you can divide half of your hours, a third of your hours, or a quarter of your hours with an agency. And that helps during those times that you have exhausted every avenue you can think of to find support staff. And there's nothing wrong with an agency staffing your home or your child's home for 20 hours a week or 30 hours a week if you're having trouble doing that. And that's the beauty of self-determination, is you can change the structure of the support system as it fits your family's needs. There's nothing written in stone that you can't still use an agency for part of your hours or all of your hours if that's what you need. Craigslist is another excellent place. I have found staff. I guess the longest provider I have had now has been with us for 10 years. She's still with us, and I found her on Craigslist. So, I know Craigslist sometimes gets a bad rap, but I still find good support staff there. So next slide, please. Training support staff. So along with the self-determination program, it is up to either the parent or the lead staff person, which we do have, to train new providers. The lead staff person has been here a long time. She does things a lot like I do them, or I want them done. So it's either me or the lead support staff person that trains the new providers. So when I hire a provider, what I do is I give them a good description of what a day looks like with whatever child I'm hiring for. If I'm hiring for Angela, I make sure to tell the person I'm interviewing, look, this is what you're going to run into. You're going to run into meltdowns. You're going to run into tantrums. You're going to run into her pulling your hair. You're going to, there's a lot of drama that goes with Angela. When I hire for Amanda, I tell them, never expect to sit down. Amanda's very active and very hyper, and she just goes from one thing to another, to another, to another. You need to have high energy when you work with Amanda. That way there's no surprises. You tell them what you want them to do during their day. You also tell them any behaviors that your child might display. So when we hire a new provider, when the lead staff person trains them, the new provider shadows us for a day to see how we do things, to see what needs to be done, and some people shadow us for 2 days. Some people need 4 days. It's just up to the new person how quickly they catch on. But we show them, we tell them, then we show them again, and then we ask if they have any questions. After they're trained, you kind of need to let them find their own way, which can be difficult at the beginning because myself as a parent, I want things done like I want them done. And I've learned over the years, not everybody's going to do that. I have to be understanding and have the perspective that maybe my way isn't always the best way. Usually it is, but not always. Just because the provider does it differently than you doesn't make it wrong. It's just different. Give that provider independence. Once you train them and you feel they've caught on, give them their independence, but always be available for questions. Another thing I do with all staff people, no matter how long they've been here, is encourage questions. A lot of times new staff people think if they ask a question, they're going to seem like they don't do their job or don't know their job. I don't expect a new person to know this job. There's a lot to it, as anybody listening knows. And I always tell them, no question is a stupid question. The only stupid question is one that's not asked. That kind of gives them a little bit of comfort knowing they can ask a question. And don't assume that the new provider knows what to do. Even providers with experience have never ran into somebody with Angelman syndrome.
Uh-oh. Kathy?
What?
Kathy, we lost you again for a minute. The last thing you said was they've not worked with someone with Angelman syndrome.
Right, they've not. Okay, so they haven't worked with somebody with Angelman syndrome, and a lot of times people with Angelman syndrome are underestimated because they don't always verbally talk or have a communication mode. People think that they don't have an opinion or aren't very smart. So that is a myth that you need to dispel immediately. How to retain support staff. As parents probably know, retaining support staff is really, really difficult. So there's a few things that I like to keep in mind when I need to retain a support staff. I am always available for questions. In this day and age, with phones so accessible and texting, I tell a provider, if I'm not home and you have a question and your coworkers don't know it, text me and ask me. There's no I in team. I am part of the team, the providers are part of the team, and the kids are part of the team. I will on occasion, more often than not, go to a provider and say to them, what do you think? How would you work through this issue? What do you think Rocky's mad about? What do you think Angela would enjoy? And so a self-determination arrangement is kind of a team player type of situation. Treat providers how you want your loved ones to be treated, with dignity and respect. It is very, very hard sometimes to keep your patience with providers. But if you want the providers to be patient with your loved ones, you have to try your best to be patient and understanding. Be flexible with their schedule as best as you can. I give the providers a schedule, and that is their regular schedule. If they need a day off, they need to get their schedule covered by a coworker. Make sure that schedule is covered, and then tell me about it. I don't want to know about it right at the beginning. I want them to be independent of me, because when I'm no longer here, they have to know how to do this. Include them in problem solving. Two heads are better than one, and it makes them feel like they have input. I always say my kids have the best of the best providers, and I rely on them for their insight all the time. And it's also important to give them positive feedback. Not only do people with Angelman syndrome respond well to positive reinforcement, but so do providers. So everyone likes to hear nice job once in a while. What is the paperwork required for a self-determination arrangement? Unlike a staffing agency, it is up to us to make the schedule. coordinate in-home therapies. When one of the kids get therapy services, the case manager through our county does the referral. The agency will call us to set up a time, a date, and then we coordinate it from there, which is why we have a lead staff person, because I want this to be able to function independent from me. So that is a responsibility that the staff take on or the parents take on once you do a self-determination arrangement. You will also be connected to what's called a fiscal intermediary, an FI. That is usually an accountant that processes the payroll. You will send your timesheets to your FI weekly or biweekly. And then they process payroll, and the providers get their checks direct deposited into their bank account. Sometimes, depending on your county, you need to do your providers need to do daily data sheets that are required by your county, and you turn those in usually monthly. So one of the things about self-determination that's a little bit different is when Amanda was out of school, and Amanda, there's no slide for this. When Amanda was out of school, it was up to us to figure out what Amanda's life was going to look like when she was no longer in school. And I was visiting somebody at a hospital one day, and I thought, well, I'll just head down to volunteer services and see if they can help us. Amanda had been out of school for a few months, which means she was home with us, which isn't always good for her. And I went down to volunteer services. They just had a bunch of volunteers quit. So Mandy started volunteering at the local hospital 3 days a week, Monday through Wednesday. And she does things like she goes around the hospital, she gathers wheelchairs. If somebody needs directions, Amanda can't talk, but she can take them to where they need to go. She's really learned the hospital really well. The kind of cool thing is she picks up the medical files from patients' rooms and takes them to the nursing station. Because Mandy's nonverbal, she can't violate HIPAA laws. So Mandy's the only volunteer in the hospital that does that job. So that's kind of cool that, she has a responsibility that most people don't have. So that's pretty much the nuts and bolts of self-determination. I tried to keep it, kind of short, which is difficult to do. Yes, that's my last slide. So I will turn this back over to Amanda, and I just want to thank everybody that's on this webinar for their time.
Thank you so much, Kathy. We had a couple of questions about if you could talk a little bit more about your family and your individual with Angelman syndrome. Sure.
For those of you listening that may not know, I have 3 children with Angelman syndrome. Amanda is 28, Angela is 24, and Rocky is 18. They have a mutation in their UBE3A gene. They're 10 years apart. Amanda and Rocky are 10 years apart. So I kind of wanted to make sure that whatever Amanda had, because she was undiagnosed for many, many years, I kind of wanted to make sure that wasn't something that could reoccur. So that also did not happen, but that's okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kathy, so much for sharing your experience with us as well. I think once again, it's very interesting to hear all these perspectives. And the one thing that we hear so much at the foundation is there's just so much need of support and work around this area. And people like you, Pat and Kathy, who can help people navigate and walk through this journey of adulthood. And so before I get to just a few questions, I just wanted to make sure everyone on the phone realizes that, one, Kathy and Pat are great resources, and I know they'd be more than willing to talk with you, but also know that we have adult family champions as well. So these are individuals who have walked different walks of life when it comes to adult transitioning and adult support. and we can hook you up with them so you can have a one-on-one call with them, and they can walk you through the journey of what some of the things that you need to be thinking about as your child moves into adulthood, your individual moves into adulthood as they're no longer a child. So if that's something that you're interested in, please make sure you reach out to the foundation at info@angelman.org, or you can always shoot me an email, call me, whatever, and we can help get that for you, because a lot of these situations might be very individual, right? Like Kathy had the best thing for her and her family. Pat has the best thing for her and her family, and it'd be different state by state as well. So it's really important for us to be able to help you and your family specifically where you're at in the journey. So that's a resource, as well as we have a whole page on our website of adult services and adult resources. So these webinars go on there. We have a whole webinar series from the ARC on there. There's just a lot of resources for you as you start navigating through this. So please make sure to utilize that. And so one question that did come up, and Pat and Kathy, I don't know if you are able to answer this, but I think it's interesting because it's been coming up in a lot of our webinars, is for everything that you have set up now for all of your individuals with Angelman syndrome, how has that worked, and how is that going during the time of COVID?
Well, I guess our situation hasn't changed very much. We don't live in a city. We live very, very rural. So as far as like our providers go, we kept them on because we're like experts at social distancing anyway.
Sure.
So we kept the kids' providers. It's been a little difficult. We've seen an increase of behaviors out of all three of my children because, they were at home for 3 months. Now that we're starting to get them out, their behaviors are lessening a little bit, but, with the exception of them being home all the time, not much has changed. Pat, how about you?
Well, Joseph has the staff that have been coming through on a regular basis. Jordan lives with him, so that's not changed. I think the problem has really been being able to get out of the apartment building. Most kids with Angelman syndrome, they're tactily defensive. Putting a mask on is probably not working. So we are doing a cap with a face shield, and we're just building up to it. He has literally been sheltering in place since March 16th, but it's not just he and his live-in attendant. His day, which I didn't really talk about, he has shifts of people from 8:30 to 3:30. There's one person who would normally take him out into the community and do whatever they're doing, and then come back, and he does shopping and what have you from 3 to 9. So there's a second person that comes in at that time, and then the overnight person takes over at that time. And then during the weekends, we have different shifts. We have different overnight people to relieve the current overnight. So what has not changed is nobody's going out of the apartment. He does have a patio in the backyard, but that doesn't really do it.
Yeah, it's an interesting time for everyone, and so it's interesting to see how the services either change or whatever that looks like. So thanks for sharing. So we're getting close to time. So I think the best thing we can do, because it's a lot of knowledge to take in, right? I mean, so people who are especially starting to get close to walking this journey, hearing this can sometimes be very overwhelming. So I would just if both of you could leave everyone with just a piece of advice on where to start. Like if you're about ready to head into this world, into this journey, what piece of advice would you give individuals as they're starting? Outside of connect with Angelman Syndrome Foundation and let them help you, what piece of advice would you give?
I think I would probably suggest taking the pieces that were in my presentation, from Social Security to IHSS to attorneys that do special needs trusts, to understanding what supported decision making is, to what is self-determination and how you find those programs in your state, and make a list of them and start doing some research depending on what age you're talking about. For a child who's 5, you got a lot more time to study all that stuff. Financing special needs trusts, the ABLE Act, those were they were buzzwords. I could tell a zillion stories that would go with each one of them, as I'm sure Kathy could start talking about different self-determination setups for different states and different families. I think I would just take some of that language and start to learn it, just like you probably did when you got into the school system and wanted to know, well, how much speech therapy? What's physical therapy? How do I do this? How do I do that? This is a new vocabulary. Learn what it is and start there. And then find a friend.
Kathy,
Well,
you.
yeah, I'm okay. I'm going to answer this honestly. The way that I found my kids' support was through prayer. I had been searching and searching about how to get support services. Who do you call, and what number do you call, and who do you talk to, and what do you say when you get that person on the phone? And I searched and searched, and I wasn't coming up with anything. And my son, when he was younger, he had terrible acid reflux. He never slept. He cried all the time. And I'll be honest with you, I started to pray. And I said, God, I just need some help. I don't know what help I need, but I know I need something. And on September 11th, 2001, when the planes were flying into the Twin Towers, the lady ahead of me turned around to me and said, "Can you believe this?" And she looked at my T-shirt. I was wearing a walkathon, an ASF walkathon T-shirt. She looked at my shirt and she said, "Do you know somebody with Angelman syndrome?" And I said, "Yeah, my daughter has it," because at the time only Amanda was diagnosed. And I said, "Yeah, my daughter has it." And we started talking about that. And I said, she ended up having 2 sons with autism. And I said, I'm having a really hard time finding help in the house, and I'm exhausted. And every morning I get out of bed, and I don't even know if I can get out of bed anymore. And she looked at me and she said, "Do you live in Macomb County?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "The intake person is my best friend. Do you want me to invite her to my house tonight so you can meet her?"
Oh.
And that's how we ended up getting support staff.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Mm-hmm. It's amazing how these kind of things happen for our community, right? The people show up in the time of when we need them the most. So thank you for being raw and sharing that. I think there's probably a lot of people on the phone that have been in that moment where they've been in that bed and said, I can't do it, right? I just can't get up. So I appreciate you sharing that. And, someone also popped up too, and I think it's important to give some advice on this as well, as if you can. I asked you to give advice for people who are moving into this, but there are some people panicking on the phone saying, "I feel like I'm really late to the party." Like, can you give some words of wisdom to the people who are, already have individuals with Angelman syndrome that are adults, but maybe still don't know all the services that are out there and feeling overwhelmed, and they're still late to the party?
Well, I think all I could say to that is, of the pieces of the puzzle that you're missing, try to name that to whomever, whether it's calling ASF or me or a champion. What pieces of the puzzle are you missing? Is it staffing? Is it funding? Is it knowing what agencies to be talking to? Do you know who the service providers are in your area? If you didn't understand any of the terms that were on, I purposely used jargon so that people knew what to look up. Otherwise, you have no idea how to look up what it is you need to know. So again, I can't say that it's any worse than finding a friend, because that's what Kathy did. That's, you know, and it could be through prayer, it could be serendipitous, but we have resources out there that'll connect you to the right people and the right stuff. You're never too late. Never too late.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
I like that idea of mapping out what you're missing, right? It could be very simple of sitting down and saying, okay, these are the services I have. These are the services I'm missing. So I need to talk to someone to find out how I can get these services in my area for, you know, for my individual.
Right.
So amazing. This has been a fantastic presentation. And, you know, I have to say, it's, you know, my child is only 5, and I don't know some of the reality that some of you face who have individuals who are who have aged out of the school system, who are transitioning, and where you guys are starting to think of, you know, we're working right now at the foundation with our Adult Services Task Force on how we help families create some sort of, you know, resource or binder, so if something does happen to a family member or a parent or whatever, that we're prepared, right? And so I just am so thankful for those of you who've walked before us and have helped, you know, really navigate some of this stuff to make it easier for some of us younger families. So thank you so much for both Kathy and Pat for being on tonight. We will make sure to get this presentation up, all their handouts. We'll put their contact information out for you guys so you can have it, as well as the champion information. Just try to remember you're not alone, and we're here for you any time that we can be. So thank you, Pat. Thank you, Kathy. I hope you guys all have a great night. Please join us for the very last session. I'm going to miss seeing you guys every single night at 8 o'clock, but tomorrow is our last session for the ASF Virtualpalooza with Dr. Lynn Bird, where she is going to walk through an awesome document that she's created that can be attached to your IEP to help people who are working with our kids to understand the medical part and the aspect of Angelman syndrome. So you don't want to miss it. Thank you all so much, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.